welcome you to the Economy, Environment and Infrastructure Committee meeting of Tuesday the 15th of March. Can I remind members the meeting is being recorded and will subsequently be made available to the public for listening purposes. At the last meeting, I indicated I would keep members up to date with the work on the South of Scotland Alliance because we had a meeting coming up with the Deputy First Minister John Swinney, and that meeting took place in the Borders, and we'll actually send round a written note just to update members on what was discussed at the meeting that took place on the 8th of February. We raised obviously a number of issues around the South of Scotland Rural Regional Economic Development Programme, issues around broadband, mobile phone connectivity. We also raised the request from the South of Scotland Alliance for the creation of a Southern Scotland NUTS 2 area, which has obviously got a real potential to bring in additional European funding. The positive news is since then, the Scottish Government's chief statistician has backed the proposal as part of a consultation that went on from the Scottish Government. So that's been given support by the chief statistician at the Scottish Government. So that will then go to the UK Government and eventually to Europe. So very positive progress around that. But we'll send out a written briefing to all members just highlighting the issues that were raised with the Deputy First Minister and what the responses were. Okay, do we have any apologies today?
Good morning. We have 18 members present today and have an apology from Councillor Nicholl. Councillor McCutcheon and Councillor Collins are not present but may be along later in the meeting.
Okay, no other apologies. Okay. Item number 2, do we have any declarations of interest? No. Okay. Item number 3, which is the minute of the committee meeting on the 12th of January 2016. Are members happy to approve it as a true record? Okay. Item number 4, the minute of the House and Subcommittee meeting of the 19th of January. Members of the House and Subcommittee were in attendance. Are they happy to approve that as a true record? Okay. Item 5, the minute of the committee meeting on the 9th of February. Members happy to approve? Sorry, Jim.
Yeah, Chair, I'm quite happy with the contents. It's just a point of clarification. I asked during that meeting regarding what the sum of 17.155 million that was awarded by the Strategic Waste Fund that was reported to a predecessor of the committee had actually been spent on. I was told I would get details. I've yet to get them.
Chair, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My apologies, Councillor McClung. That's an oversight by myself, and I will get that attended to as soon as possible. Thank you.
Okay. So members happy to approve the minute? Yeah. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, item number 6, which is a regular reports on the infrastructure asset class capital programme. I'll use my usual regular appeal to, if you've got any particular individual ward issues along footpaths in your ward, please raise them with officers after the meeting. Obviously, we're here to make strategic decisions. No doubt that will fall on deaf ears as usual, but we'll do my best. Can I ask the Director if there's anything he wishes to add to the report before members?
Nothing to add to the report at this stage, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can I open it up to members' questions? Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. I suppose just start the debate then. I'll take on board what you've said because I've got a load of parochial things I'd like to discuss, but I'll take on board what you've said in regards to keeping it strategic. So probably just to cut, rather than going into individual items on the report, I think there's, for me, as I read through it, there's a piece of work missing and what I'd like to see, so I'll cut straight to the chase in regards to when I come to the recommendations. I'd like to see a recommendation added in regards to having a further report based around about how we allocate the actual capital structure, the capital funding here across Dumfries and Galloway. Going back to 2010, I think it was, with a report stating we were about £160 million in backlog. Last year we got a verbal update saying we're in and around the region of £205 million. This year I don't think we've got an update as of yet. If we have, I'd like to hear that, but I don't think we'll have as of yet, but I would imagine it would be to the detriment, so it would be higher again than 205 going on the previous trends. So I would like to see a report coming back, similar to the one back in 2010, outlining the roads conditions, how the money's shared out across the piece, how that could, different options in regards to how that could be maybe better shared out or even possibly procured. Now we've got a wider remit under EEI and how it moves forward, with DG First now being under our umbrella, so to speak. So Chairman, I can leave it at that. Without getting too parochial, there's a lot of questions I have asked previously. I'll mention it now because I raised it a few committees ago in regards to some street lighting projects that were on board, and there was Brykirk, the village where I actually stay, which is within my ward. There was work undertaken there, and I've raised it at committee, and I'd just like to thank and actually commend the staff for all the hard work they did thereafter in order to rectify any problems. I'd just like to put that on public record. They've done a fantastic job over the last 2 or 3 months rectifying that, putting that right. So I'd like to put that on record as well. It was a really good piece of work. So when it comes to the recommendations, Chair, just as an opening gambit, I'll come back to that, but I think we need a further report in order to try and realise how the money could be better spent, and potentially, I think, going into the next council next year, how we could address putting a higher level of funding into the roads, because clearly there's a detriment and the roads are getting worse and worse, and we pick up on that very, very strongly over in the east of the region, Andale and Estill, especially the amount of complaints we get in regards to potholes and such like.
Council set a budget a month ago, Ian. You obviously had opportunities to put in a budget, any particular proposals you had, but obviously we did change the way in which we allocate funding for roads. I don't know if Stephen wants to say anything about that. We actually did change the direction, and there was a very substantial report, I have to say, explaining the basis for that, but I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Stephen.
Yeah, I think, Chair, just we did bring the annual status and options report for the carriageway back in November 14, and that kind of set the direction for the kind of decisions on the investment. And out of that, we saw much more of a focus on lower cost options like surface dressing, so that we could hit more of the network. And certainly the budget that's before you in terms of the capital investment, how to allocate the £9.5 million at the infrastructure asset class reflects that going forward, that there is a higher than historic level of spend on the likes of the surface dressing compared to the kind of resurfacing type elements of the carriageway programmes. And that is a decision that was made before by this committee that is being worked through. And we're going to see, hopefully over a period of time, just that the benefit that has on arresting the rate of deterioration on the road condition index figures.
Ian Dick next.
Thanks, Chair. It's just on the subject of carriageway repairs. I asked at an SNP group meeting and got an explanation about the cut and patching. Since we bought all the equipment there, the change in policy was to be that any repairs would be done on the basis of cutting, patching and sealing. And the explanation we were given was owing to wet conditions, the type of patching had to be of a certain nature. But I'm still not entirely convinced, and maybe somebody could explain to me why we don't actually seal the patches, because part of the problem is when the water gets in and in a hard frost, it brings up the patch. And the whole point about this was to make sustainable repairs that wouldn't need patching by the time the next winter comes along. So why are we not sealing the repairs we do? Because they've certainly been of an excellent quality, but I've noticed quite often now we don't have seals put on the repairs.
Could I come back, Chair? Yeah, thanks. I mean, there's a number of different ways that we take forward the kind of reactive repairs and respond to potholes. When the weather's better and warmer, we'll see the jet patcher coming out more often, and that's where we fire a spray of hot emulsion and aggregate. So there's no kind of cut and patch in those cases. But also we have other repair methods as you've hinted at, where we do cut and we actually place material. Some of the planned structural overlay schemes that we approved back in January, the kind of shorter surfacing schemes, that would be cut and material placed to identify an area with a significant number of roads defects. Where we're doing that, what you're probably not seeing is sealing on the top of the repair. The good practice would be to seal the edges of the patch, and you might not see sealing on the top for a number of reasons. One of them might be is we're now moving into the surface dressing season at the start of the summer. We're about to move on to the pre-patching works for that, and we probably won't seal the top because effectively with the surface dressing we will be sealing everything anyway. The other kind of issue about kind of overbanding or sealing the edges of repairs is the kind of skid resistance issue, and in the past I think that was quite kind of comprehensively used, but it does cause problems in wet skid for the likes of motorbikes. So there was less kind of sealing of the tops of repairs and more sealing of the edge repairs, which is not evident after the patch is complete.
Alistair?
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. It's basically a process question, for want of better terms. So paragraph 3.28, cycleways. We're talking, in fact, about a bid for works at Eastfield Road, Dumfries, as agreed in the 12th of January 2016 meeting of the committee, was not submitted because resources were focused on the three more major bids listed above. Now, I've no quibbles, sir, with the decision taken, but how is that arrived at, Chair? You know, are you, as Chair, consulted, or is it an officer's decision, etc.?
Alistair, sorry. I'm reading the paragraph now. What is it you're asking?
It's my question, sir. It's a bid for works at Eastfield Road, Dumfries, as agreed in the 12th of January 2016 meeting, was not submitted because resources were focused on the three more major bids listed above. They're listed earlier in the paragraph, Chair. As I say, my question basically is a process one. Who takes that decision? Are you consulted as Chair, or? And it's not, as I say, I'm not being accusatory, just for information. As I say, what process is deployed to deal with such decisions, sir?
Certainly not consulted as Chair on that, but I don't know if John wants to add to that.
Yes, thanks, Chair. You're quite right. The ambition maybe exceeded the abilities, but the application process was more onerous than we'd anticipated for these bids. The progress with the work from our colleagues in engineering design was also not to the point where we'd hoped. Again, we're trying to do as much as we can, but the reality was I would have preferred to, and what we decided to do was put in hopefully three fairly good bids rather than four bids that maybe would all have failed. What I'm told from Sustrans with this community linked funding is that it is actually very heavily oversubscribed, and therefore the qualification, the criteria for actually being successful with that might be quite high. They do it on a kind of point scoring basis. We'll see how we've done with these ones this year, and what I'd hope, if we've not been successful, is to get some sort of feedback almost onto whether it's worthwhile actually considering to actually put in the number of bids that we do, or maybe we just try and be a bit more realistic about what we're actually bidding for. Thank you.
Grateful to you, sir. I think perhaps it might be worthwhile considering it. I'm not trying to tie our officials, Chair, in bureaucratic knots. It's important you've got the resources, get on and do the business. But I think maybe consideration might possibly be given to some form of protocol, for want of a better term, which, apart from anything else, injects a degree of transparency and, most importantly of all, Chair, affords protection, as it were, to council officials. As I say, if in fact they're challenged. I'm not challenging, Chair. I'm merely asking, for information as to the background as to how this came about and how it took place. I'm grateful. Thank you.
If I was consulted, I'd have to declare an interest because one of them's on my street, Maxfield Avenue, so I probably wouldn't have been very much help on that one. But can I just ask, though, the one that we didn't submit, is it our intention to ultimately submit that for the next round of funding? Is that because you're still obviously agreed by committee? Yeah?
What I'd like to do is, it's a scheme at Eastfield Road, Westfield Road, that it basically fills a gap in the existing cycle network coming from Georgetown towards the town centre. We've looked at it in the past. There was issues raised about difficulty in constructing this because of the suspected position of some services, electrical cables. I've asked engineering design to have another look at it, and they had some ideas as to how we could actually overcome these difficulties. My intention would still to be to progress this scheme and to get it to a stage either where we actually just proceed with it directly or put it in for further funding if that's possible. I'm all for spending other people's money on our council. Thank you.
I think it's an absolutely relevant point that Councillor Geddes raises, and we'll certainly consider that. Ultimately, to take responsibility for that decision.
Okay, thanks for that, Alistair. Patsy and then Jim.
Thank you. It's just a clarification. I'm looking at page 29, which is carriageway resurfacing, and there's a lot of reserve schemes from last year on this. And Are they only going to be done if there's money made, left over, it's available, or are they going to go forward because they just didn't get done last year? And I don't understand the difference between carried forward in that case and reserved schemes. I just wonder if you could tell me.
Thanks. Yep. Where we're saying a scheme is carried forward for 16-17, we're saying the works weren't complete in 15-16, but we had actually planned to do the works in 15-16. So there would be various reasons why we've delayed those works and we've carried them forward. Where we're showing that a scheme, so that was be labelled carried forward 15-16. Where we're labelled it reserve from 15-16, what we did in the past was, the past couple of years, we actually generated, at this point in the committee cycle, when we were asking members to agree the capital programme, we put a lot of reserve schemes in, and we had the schemes that we thought we would get through with the budget that we have, and we had a number of reserve schemes, particularly on the carriageway schemes, because as we get to the end of the year, and maybe other parts of the programmes haven't spent up as much as they should have done, we tried to get the capital that's close to an outturn position. We tried to get the spend through for the capital programme, and we brought the reserve schemes in. What we've found in the past is we've probably built up too many reserve schemes, and what we're actually doing is we're saying that those reserve schemes, because they've appeared in previous programmes, have to be a priority for the financial years going forward. I think probably going forward we'll work with fewer reserve schemes and to avoid that situation where it seems that a lot of schemes, I think it's a kind of perception thing with the public where we have a long list of schemes. Some of them are not going to get done because they're on the reserve list, but we wanted kind of pre-approval for them. Haven't had that pre-approval, we're just making sure this year that we're capturing them within the programme going forward.
For clarification, those will be these ones that are reserve schemes, and it's almost 50% of them. That's what brought my attention to it. So they will become sort of priorities, will they, for this year? So we won't see them on the reserved thing next year because they haven't been done again. Well, they're not permanently reserved, if you know what I mean.
I think not permanent reserved. Not necessarily a priority for doing in this programme. No, everything you see here, we're now planning to do within this financial year, and I think that's the confusion we're trying to avoid by introducing reserves in the past. When they're programmed, it will be a case of when the best time to go in and actually do the works will take place.
Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I will try and keep this strategic, but it is relating to two things that are in my ward. Paragraph 320, there's information there regarding further damage being done. Please tell me that the further damage that's been done hasn't been to repairs that we've already carried out, that we were going to carry out over 3 years instead of the 1 year that was originally planned. And 330, the contaminated land, it's nice to see that we're going to try and sort out the problems at Auchinninnies, but there was a previous project in there that I can now see no further trace of as regarding contaminated land in Sederunt.
Kilstay Bay, the idea was within the current financial year's coastal infrastructure programme, there was more works to be undertaken at Kilstay Bay. We've actually put those on hold and we're going to look at carrying those out next year. The reason we've put them on hold is because the damage that was incurred with the recent flooding and the storms through the winter has affected an adjacent area, and that the scheme that we want to take forward as one scheme is actually a larger area being protected. And we can accommodate that within the coastal infrastructure programme, the funding for next year. So it's damage that's occurred recently to an adjacent area of the old wall that hadn't been repaired, and we're looking at a more comprehensive protection scheme in that area, probably with rock armour, to afford protection to the area that we were going to repair this year and the adjacent area that has been damaged.
Can just come back in on that. When we say next year, are we talking 16-17 or 17-18?
16-17. It's within the programme here and it's listed in the detail of the report. If I could come back on the contaminated land issue that Councillor McClung has raised and the reference to Sederunt, we're still working on that as one of the higher priorities within the contaminated land team, looking at the remediation of that site. It is quite a large site, and we're doing the further work on how to manage down the costs of remediation that would be required for that site. It is linked with the waterfront project that we're taking forward, and is very much linked with the options that have been taken for the full business case for the marina there and the development. So it's not, it's in the background, but it is linked to that project in terms of the consideration being given to it and any remediation that would be possible.
Finlay?
Thanks, Chair. Just regarding flood risk management, it's a bit disappointing that we don't actually see any detail to how the 240,000 is going to be spent, considering the issues we've had this year with flooding right across the region. We're going to agree today to the investment of 240,000, but we've actually no indication of whether that goes anywhere near what's needed. You know, on a regular basis throughout the winter, we get calls about roads flooding and whatever, and the answer we often get is, yeah, there's an issue with the culvert, or we need to do some drainage work, but there's nothing in the budget for it. So today we're expected to approve that level of funding, but we actually don't know whether it's adequate or whether it's going to address, you know, parochial issues that I certainly get on a weekly basis throughout the winter. When are we likely to get details of the work that's going to be carried out? And are you confident that 240,000 is actually going to be enough to stop some of the flooding incidents we get?
I think in terms of the way that the budget's put together, what we're asking members to do a couple of things today, and one of them, as Councillor Carson points out, is how to split the allocation between the 9.5 million between the separate programmes that we take forward as a committee. And the other decision we're actually asking members to do is for most of those programmes is agree the detail of how that funding will be spent. We don't have the detail on the flood risk management for the allocation that we're recommending is taken forward. In terms of how we look at the apportionment of the 9.5 million, I mean, it's quite a kind of difficult decision, and obviously giving members as much information as possible is useful in that. But we're looking at all the kind of priorities across all the kind of infrastructure. Certainly this capital programme and what we've used it for in the past has been for kind of small scale flood protection works where there's a capital investment required in kind of drainage or new kind of drainage systems or improvements to some of the existing flood protection historic schemes that we have. We haven't quantified that, and that's probably very much because the flood risk management team have been focused on the kind of effects of the winter and coming out of that, and the kind of grant applications over the first kind of two months of this calendar year, as well as focused on the kind of local flood risk management plan, on which there's a fuller report, and that identifies the kind of bigger capital projects that need to be taken forward. I would hope to come back to the next committee, the next EEI committee, and give some detail on the content of that programme and what we would prioritise against that for capital works. But it's looking at kind of specific interventions on the ground over and above the kind of high level projects, or the larger projects that we're looking at within the local flood risk management plan.
Ronnie Ogilvie.
Thanks, Chair. My concern is one of communication and the public's expectation. Some of the things that are carried forward are major investments in some of the larger towns, and I know one in particular has been carried over for 2 years. Now, when we agree these, you go back and you say, well, there's something that's going to happen, and it doesn't happen. So, one, local members aren't informed, and two, the public, through us, I suppose, don't get informed either. So the expectations raised, and it's difficult. So I just wondered how we could address that. If we're going to carry stuff forward, we need to know early doors so that we can manage public's expectation. Because, as I say, some of these are major investments in the bigger towns, and they'll be welcome once they do come.
I think, Chair, thanks. I mean, without considering specific schemes, I think in terms of the reporting that we do in the cycle of reporting, we're at the EI committee kind of on 5 occasions through the year. 3 of those, the kind of outturn report, looking back in the financial year, this report planning forward, but we also have the 3 reports through the year in the EI committee, and we try and capture there where we see there are particular issues with works that have been included or agreed within a programme, and where there might be delays incurred, and the kind of reasons for that, whether that be a kind of resource issue or whether that be a delay to match the project with an adjacent project, or looking at the timing of the project in terms of best delivery. And that, so I see the mechanism for that is through the committee process here.
I notice in 3.32 it's talks about the strategic timber transport scheme. It's anticipated that a further round of grant funding will be released in the financial year 2016-17. I understand the Scottish Government have now announced that extra funding, so I just wonder if the Director could maybe update members on that funding.
Right, thank you, Chair. The Timber Transport Forum held its national conference in Perth last Thursday, and on behalf of the Minister, the Head of Forestry Commission Scotland announced that there will be a further £2.85 million for a single year funding for the Strategic Timber Transport Fund. Now, that's excellent news, and we anticipated that that fund would be continued, and the paragraph that you see at 3.32 advises that we're going to make a further bid to that fund for the scheme described. We will, of course, be looking at other potential areas that we will bid for, because that money, 2.85 million, has to be spent within the next financial year, 16-17.
Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. I'll be really brief with this one because I think Councillor Ogilvie brought up a relevant part there, and hopefully the reserve schemes no being there will give us that reassurance as well that these will be prioritised and fulfilled this year. But just it's one on page 30, if you didn't mind, if you can, Greencroft, Wind, Annan. I'm just trying to understand exactly what's being proposed there. It's under Andale and Estill, it's just above halfway up the page, Greencroft, Wind, and in coordination with the proposed traffic management scheme, because I will be asked questions on that.
I'll let one word question in, and then we'll move on to the recommendations.
Thanks, Chair. We have a traffic management scheme at Greencroft Wind that's been agreed by the Annandale and Estill Area Committee. Part of that was a 20 mph speed limit, a couple of road humps, and no motor vehicles except for access restriction. Those have been advertised, and objections have been received to the no motor vehicles except for access restriction. We'll attempt to resolve those by discussion, as is the normal practice, but I would anticipate we'll probably end up back at the area committee for a consideration of that. What the item that I think you're referring to is just some resurfacing on that road, and to coordinate that at the same time. So, you know, we've been criticised in the past for not coordinating different programmes, so we are trying to do that better in the future. So there's no point us putting in traffic calming, then somebody wants to come along and resurface a year later or something.
I really appreciate that word question being asked. It's very important, I think, to the local ward members in that area, and we're keen to see that come back to the committee chair just for final ratification.
Okay, members, can we turn to the recommendations on page 19? Members happy to approve 2.1, 2.2, to agree 2.3, accept 2.4, 2.5, 2.6. Ian?
Just in regards to 2.7, Chair, or add it to one of the recommendations, but probably 2.7, just asking for the further report. And I suppose in broad terms, it's quite simple, similar to the one we received back around about 2010, where it outlined the detriment, the backlog, road conditions, and so on and so forth. So for future provision, for future budget allocations in future years, I would imagine for the new council in particular, they can look at that seriously and understand what the real detriment is across Dumfries and Galloway, and make every attempt to put that into order. So just a simple recommendation, ask for a report similar to that one back in 2010.
We had one in 2015, do we not? Sure there was a detailed report on it. Sorry, Stephen. Yeah.
So, Chair, yes. I think at the end of 2015, we gave some update on the RCI information.
Another update when we have that information. Okay, members, happy with that? Ian?
Chairman, I'll certainly move that as a recommendation if I need to. I'd rather not, but I would move it. But it is for a further report, being quite clear in regards to it, similar to that one we received back in 2010. So we have a full understanding of a road condition across Dumfries and Galloway, and the allocation of funds that's needed. I think for the next council it needs to be taken seriously for different reasons, budget reasons in particular, the restrictions on funding we've had over the last 4 or 5 years. We haven't had the money to allocate. There's been a recent announcement from UK Government to Scottish Government saying that, listen, you're getting the same money for the next 6 years. Hopefully that will be part of the solution to solving this problem for Dumfries and Galloway. Might or might not be, but at least we have to be up to speed as a council in regards to what the problems that are in front of us and how we can actually face up to them. So I would move that, Chairman, that we do have that.
Can I just ask Stephen when we actually get the detailed figures that would allow us to actually compile a report like that?
The figures for the road condition index usually come through annually about September time each year, and the survey is usually done through the winter, through the summer across the whole of Scotland, and the figures are crunched as an area is completed. The survey contractor releases the data, but it's usually about September time that we get that information updating. So each September, update.
So obviously some time off, but presumably that meant you could take those figures and compile a report in anticipation of the budget process, I suppose, couldn't you? Make groups aware. Okay. Okay. I'm sure we can achieve that, but it will be some time because those figures don't come up for several months. But members happy to have that information provided ahead of the budget process? Yeah. Okay. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, can we turn to item number 7? Okay, members, item number 7 is on effectively the implementation of our flood risk management plan. Can I ask the Director if there's anything he wishes to add to the report before members?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to add to the report, but we would like to welcome along David Scott of SEPA, who is here to answer any questions that members may have. We're very grateful for the support that SEPA are giving us in preparation of these plans.
Thanks very much, and welcome to David. Okay, can I open it up to members' questions? Okay, well, form a queue. I think with Ian, Alistair, Jim, and Dennis, and then Jim Dempster. Okay, Ian, you're off first.
Hi, thanks, Chair. Just in the recommendations at 2.3, it notes that the actions to manage flood risk will be delivered by others, SEPA and Scottish Water, and are not detailed within this report. I think one of the things that came out of the recent flooding, not least of all in Newton Stewart and Langham, was that there's an absolute necessity of coordination between all the agencies who have some locus within flood management. And the one I think I actually mentioned because of the problems caused with the two rivers, the Dee and the Cree, was the Forestry Commission. Why are those flood risk measures not being detailed within the terms of this report? Because that would evidence the fact that this council is actually talking to these other members and give us some kind of confidence that, that this is a coordinated effort, which I think has probably been part of the problem in the past.
Thank you, Chair. The reason for the point 2.3 was that the other authorities, Scottish Water and Forestry Commission, for example, are responsible authorities and have duties under the legislation to work with local authorities, and in our case, a lead local authority, to manage flood risk. The text that they provide will be standard text and will go across the whole of Scotland pretty much in terms of that. We are working closely with SEPA, and as you can see, we have SEPA again at this committee, as we did in July last year. I can provide further details on things that SEPA are doing, and there is detail in this report. For example, if we take Newton Stewart, SEPA will be providing a flood warning system for Newton Stewart in a similar manner as is operated on the White Sands, and likewise we're doing that for Langham, for the Esk through Langham. So SEPA are doing that. Scottish Water, again, we have a duty to work with them to manage flood risk across the region, and the report details two actions in terms of delivering surface water management studies in Dumfries and Annan, where surface water risk is a problem, and that is coordinated with Scottish Water. Part of the reason why I don't have the full details at the time of drafting this report on what SEPA, Scottish Water and Forestry Commission will be putting into the local flood risk management plan is those details were not available at the time of drafting this report. And I think what's important is that this committee, this council agrees the elements of work that we are to deliver.
Ian?
Can I just come back? I mean, I understand that there's probably a standard text which comes out all over Scotland, but I think what members of this committee, particularly in view of recent events, would like to see is what other agencies are actually doing with specifically for those areas which have been affected, and the level of coordination between this council and those agencies. I think that would be extremely helpful. The other thing too is, as far as Scottish Water is concerned, there are issues, and this was something I think it was Dennis and I raised at the last meeting when the flooding issues was discussed, was basic drainage maintenance. We have I've had instances in my locality, and also come to my attention from another one about the fact that the drains are either blocked or they're not working. That's one of the most basic things that we ought to be doing. Now, if that's a Scottish Water issue, then this council needs to be raising it with Scottish Water, and we need to see evidence that the fact that our basic drainage maintenance is being upkept.
Councillor, I couldn't agree with you more that we need to be dealing with Scottish Water. If it's road drainage issue, that's a local authority matter to deal with. If it's combined sewer network issues and problems in that regard, then you're correct, that is a matter for Scottish Water. But it's also a matter for individuals, members and officers in any format to engage directly with these people. And I stress the importance, particularly with Scottish Water, that matters if you have constituents who have concerns over Scottish Water issues, that these are raised with Scottish Water, because unless they know about the problems, they don't record that information, and it doesn't end up on their future business plans for improvement works. So I strongly encourage that side of things. But myself and my colleagues engage regularly with Scottish Water at a national level and a local level where there are problems. But if there's specific instances that you have with Scottish Water apparatus, for example, then you can speak to me after this meeting or to Brian or the team, and we will take that matter up directly with Scottish Water.
Alistair.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. As far as I'm concerned, sir, this is not only a comprehensive, but it's an extremely helpful report. And I may say, in a Newton Stewart context, that by and large, it mirrors the contents of a briefing note which Mr. Speedy and his staff were kind enough to give to me at the early part of this month, and which I in turn passed on to the Cree Valley Flood Action Group. And can I say, Chair, that Mr. Speedy has had a response this morning from that group following upon their meeting last week. And interestingly enough, Chair, it is in my view, it's a quality response, but it's extremely supportive and appreciative of the work that the Council are taking in a Newton Stewart context. One minor caveat, which I won't particularly go into, it's in relation to the temporary replacement of a wall that gave way under the pressure of water in the last big flood. But I'm sure we can get reassurance and get that sorted out. One other point I would bring to attention, Chair, and I didn't bearing in mind in deference to your remarks on item number 6, I didn't raise it there, but there's a reference made in this report, paragraph 3.27, about the Sparling Bridge and the quality work that the Council have had done over the last 2 or 3 years from a hydraulic modelling perspective has indicated that this bridge has an impact on flood flows, raising water levels upstream. And my point, Chair, would be that while the bridge is a much valued and a well-used facility, it was done, I think the Army, Chair, were involved in the provision of it. And without being censorious, I'm a wee bit regretful, Chair, that perhaps that possibility wasn't foreseen at the time that the bridge was provided. And that's not meant to be disrespectful, to the Army as providers. It would have been good, in fact, if that had been recognised at the time and the bridge had been raised several feet when you wouldn't have had that problem, Chair. And I think it's maybe just a wee bit of a cautionary note for the Council and other agencies going forward that, sort of try to ensure that we cover every reasonable eventuality and we can benefit as a consequence, because it's unfortunate, as I say, the bridge is a much valued and a well-used facility, but it's just a wee bit unfortunate that that was not perhaps foreseen at the time, as I say, and acted upon accordingly, Chair. But again, let me stress that this Flood Action Group, has wide support in the community, and it's extremely supportive from its perspective of the work that the Council are doing thus far. I would hope, Chair, that that degree of satisfaction will continue and we will see these works being brought through to a successful conclusion. One point I would reiterate, Chair, and I make no apologies for reiterating it, when the leader, Councillor Nicholson, was kind enough to visit Newton Stewart and see the devastation for himself firsthand on the day of the floods, I think the point was made that we've really got to get the Scottish Government to conduct a radical reappraisal, as it were, of the criteria which, in fact, are used to determine degrees and level of funding for flood prevention schemes for rural communities. And I make no apologies for reiterating that. I'm aware, Chair, that the Council have taken matters up with the Government. I'll be interested to see just exactly the details of the response going forward, but I think it's absolutely essential that we hold the Government to account in that regard. Grateful for your time, sir.
Thank you very much, Alistair. James, do you want to?
Thank you, Councillor Geddes. Can I just pick up on a couple of things in the report? One of the actions the authority has is to work with the Flood Action Group in Newton Stewart, and as we have done with the Moffat Flood Action Group, we will be doing that, and I'm in the process of setting something up like that, and we certainly appreciate their support. With respect to the Sparling Bridge and the observation that if we'd considered the flood levels at the time of putting the bridge in, obviously I can claim complete ignorance of that, having not been involved at that time, but I would say in all seriousness that the engineering design are acutely aware of this kind of issue, and we would discuss flood flows in any culvert design, any bridge design, to ensure that where feasible and to the maximum floods that we can really consider, we would raise structures accordingly. On the matter of the Sparling Bridge and the wall at Newton Stewart, both are in next year's capital programme for works. So the repairs. And on that note, I maybe take this opportunity just to give a further update on the Sparling Bridge. We were due to do a press release later in the week and advise local members as well, and I will do that as soon as I've finished in this committee. The recent dive survey work at Sparling Bridge has shown that actually the east abutment on the mini gaff side is severely scoured, much worse than previously thought, to the extent where it will not be possible to repair that abutment. So at the moment, the view from the engineers is it's actually the bridge that's holding the abutment up, which is slightly concerning to say the least. So what we shall be doing is, starting on Thursday, we will be putting in some rock armour underneath the abutment of the bridge. That's the support for the bridge on the east side. That rock armour is going in to prevent further scour, because if we get any more scour, it's likely that it will settle and maybe damage the bridge structure. So that will be done very carefully, starting on Thursday. Fortunately, river levels are quite low. That will not allow the bridge to be reopened. It's still too unsafe to open the bridge. But what it does mean is that when we look to replace the bridge, it will be a case of building new supports for the bridge on both sides of the river, either further upstream or further downstream at the raised level, which will suit the flood, to reduce the flood risk associated with the structure backing up the flows. And the intention would be to progress that. Well, we are progressing that now in terms of design and in terms of engagement with landowners. So it was just to give you that update, and that will be going out to the Community Council and to local members and as a press release, but it seemed sensible to mention that now.
Thanks very much for the update, James. We have Jim next.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's quite fortuitous that Moffat was mentioned there. The first item I've been asked to bring up is on behalf of a colleague. 3.13 in the report highlights details to deliver studies in PVA 14/02 for Moffat, focusing on the River Annan, Burnock Water, Crosslaw Burn and the runoff from Gallow Hill. However, stakeholders in Moffat, including property owners in the area affected by the recent flooding events at Annonside and the Glebe, simply want to know in black and white terms what physical action or works that the Council will carry out and when. If no works are to be carried out, then stakeholders, including the Flood Action Group, need to know as soon as possible so that they can plan and deliver their own protection and not be left hanging on with yet another flood study. I'll now turn to my own ones. Stranraer, the 3.22, the outstanding work items 4 and 6. these outstanding work items have been on the go since I was a councillor, which is now 4 years. When are we actually going to see some progress on agreements being made, or when are we actually going to take the decision to actually do the coercive powers that we keep on being told that we have? And on the subject of the Stranraer one, 3.48 says may allow for the works at Stranraer to be funded, yet at page 68 it says Dumfries and Galloway Council have allocated monies for the completion of these works. Is the funding there, or is the funding not there?
Okay, starting with the dealing with the first one, Councillor McCollum, the Moffat issue. Sorry, Councillor McClung, the Moffat issue. The report clearly states at 3.11 that there will be no works programme to be undertaken, and this includes Castle Douglas and Moffat. The extent of the works that we're putting in the local flood risk management plan is substantial, as has been shown over the winter. Flooding impacts across the whole of the region, and we need to, as best we can, prioritise that works have been done in Moffat, which has reduced flood risk from the Gallow Hill. The community have signed up extensively to the property level protection. We have done works of maintenance just in the last 2 weeks on a culvert that was being concerns have been raised. So we have undertaken works in Moffat, and we will continue to do so, to the intention of coming up with options to reduce flood risk in Moffat through a revised flood study. In terms of Stranraer, yeah, we haven't made the progress that we would like to make. I think the challenge we have, particularly in Stranraer, is that one area is the level of protection is offered by the existing situation, which, while the landowner doesn't appreciate that, and we would like to formalise it, it still sets up a lot of challenges. I will tell you that engineering design are continuing to work on this project. I have one officer, and that's his principal task. In terms of the funding, that scheme has always been funded by the local authority. However, we've flagged that scheme up to Scottish Government as well, with the opportunity for potentially drawing down monies from Scottish Government, and that's why it appears in the application to Scottish Government last year. I would like to see that, assuming we can achieve a positive cost-benefit ratio on the Stranraer scheme, if we're looking at extensive monies for example, compensation, which may be considered appropriate, if we would take external advice on that from the Valuation Office, but if that's considered appropriate and it still means the scheme's affordable, then I see it would be appropriate for this authority to be looking for some funding from Scottish Government for that scheme. It's just, if we can do it on the cheap and we don't need to go to Scottish Government, let's do it that way. If we can't, I'm going to go cap in hand. I have no problem with that.
I quite agree with that sentiment.
Okay, we have Dennis next, and then Jim Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it is under 2.3 in the recommendations, and it's to do with the other things that are not mentioned that SEPA might do. And I think right across this region now we have a problem growing, and that problem is growing probably because some of our rivers now flash flood because of the proper drainage in forests and in fields, etc. A problem that never existed in the past, and that is the sediment and gravel build-up. And it's right across this region, and I really believe now it is starting to destroy riverbanks and in some cases structures like walls, because rivers have now changed their courses, and at one end you may have 8 or 9 foot of gravel, and at the other end the river is scored out and the flows is forced across to that side. So it's really to ask SEPA if and when and how we go about gravel extraction in some of our rivers, or even the respread, because of the flash flooding we have changed absolutely the way our rivers flow, and the damage that is being done now is really quite significant right across the region. And I know there's a problem and an argument about moving gravel, but the river moves the gravel naturally, so why can't we then redistribute or take it out, because it should not be where it's been put.
Dennis, I have a SEPA colleague sitting next to me, and I'm kind of reluctant to put him on the spot with this, as he's here from a sort of policy flood risk management point of view rather than a geomorphological point of view of gravel removal in rivers. I mean, the comment I would make is that we are seeing changes in the rivers. We are seeing gravel build up that perhaps wasn't there in the past because it was removed in the past. It was removed in the past for a variety of reasons. And we've discussed this, and I've discussed it with other members. It's removed in the past as a source of washed gravel. It's removed in the past because it was believed to reduce flood risk. My concern with undertaking works of gravel removal in watercourses is principally that the evidence has shown that there is little benefit during large flood events of having that additional capacity in the river. I know that I'm fighting, in some respects, a losing battle publicly on this, and that's the nature of the beast. But I would urge caution that if we get into a process where we rely on gravel removal to reduce flood risk, it will be an expensive revenue process to continue for the authority, and one we need to be mindful of. If we take examples where there may be invasive non-native species present on these gravel islands and such like, then the disposal of that material is extremely expensive. It's not a case of being reused. It's considerations like that. But principally, our work has shown, and nationally has shown, and I can pass you national documentation on this, that during big flood events, gravel removal will have limited impact. We will do it where it's appropriate, and we will consider that where it's appropriate, and I will consider that as part of continuing works in Langham, which is obviously specifically where your main concerns are. But I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, David.
No, I think nationally this is a topic that has come up time and time again. And again, it's just the evidence base that we're looking for. It's not completely a blanket against it. We are looking for the evidence base that it will have a benefit. And things are saying there, it's not always there. There are certain locations where it is.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, the trouble is it is changing river courses, the way they flow. It's pushing them from one side to the other, and that is doing damage to the banks and taking the banks away, and even in cases, say, damaging property and walls. When a gravel bank builds to 6 and 7 feet high and is 100 metres long, then you've got a problem. And it's not just the Langham area. I believe it's happening in rivers right across. It's not even about taking the gravel out of the river, it's about redistribution, because what's been scored out, because the course has changed, and because you've narrowed that course and the river flows much faster through it, you're starting to expose things like pipes that run under the river, electric cables that run under the rivers, and that really needs to be addressed because it is getting worse all the time, especially as that bank builds up. They're getting longer, they're getting further, they're getting higher, and if they need to be addressed on a regular basis. And it's almost redistribution in the river. I hear the argument and quite believe you're quite right. It does not cause extra flooding. It just does damage on one side of the river when it's there because it's pushed the flow right across to somewhere else and put pressure on banks that never had pressure on them before. So it really is about redistribution, and the whole argument about the vertebrae that live there. I mean, I remember the days when rivers had 5,000 and 6,000 sea trout in pools, and gravel was extracted regularly, and the fish used to feed on it and love it. Now we've no fish in the river, we're trying to protect them, because we're saying that these things that live in these banks are vital, but they redistribute, regenerate, and they also help feed the fish population. And that's not happening now because some of these gravel banks are dry, bone dry, so the invertebrate in them will be dead. So again, I think there's a whole issue here that needs to be properly looked at, because some of our rivers are suffering badly, and they're suffering badly because we're not maintaining them properly. And one of those things is either the extraction or the redistribution of the gravel banks, because they are getting quite severe.
Councillor Mail, we will undertake to have a discussion with SEPA on this particular issue that you've raised, and we'll take that matter forward and advise you accordingly.
So that. Okay, next, Jim Dempster in Finlay.
Hey, thanks, Chair. I see on page 3 there's a reference to PVA, potentially vulnerable areas in Newcastleton and New Cumnock. And I know, well, obviously it says in the paper they're in different local authority areas. And the question, I suppose, is, and I'm quite comforted by the fact it's featured here, that we are communicating and speaking to these neighbouring authorities, because clearly if in New Cumnock establish some flood prevention measures, that may well have an adverse impact on Kirkconnell, which is further downstream. So there's a clear need to keep in contact or maintain contact with neighbouring authorities on any measures that they implement to make sure that we're aware of them and take measures to try and mitigate what happens further downstream. On page 44, PVA 14/01, I'm kind of concerned about the last paragraph. Being somewhat cynical, it would seem to suggest that the way to sort the flooding in Kirkconnell is to knock the houses down and move the folk to Killahome, because Killahome clearly doesn't flood. So I'd be interested to know why that particular paragraph's in there and what the suggestion or inference is. And I'm happy to take that at another time, because obviously it's just part of a wider discussion in the document, but it's the only one that talks about talking to social landlords as a way of sorting a housing problem. And lastly, when you've got communities, and Money Ives one that have established a flood prevention team within their community council, I'm sure you will speak to them, and I'd encourage you to do that on every occasion, because it's community engagement that actually works, and it's quite a newly established a group, so it's not featured here yet, but they are in situ. But I'd be interested mainly in an assurance or reassurance that we're speaking to other authorities where that's necessary, and maybe at some stage tell me what's actually meant by that last paragraph in 14/01.
I'll respond to the first question just in terms of the coordination, and I can reassure you that as part of the work that has gone into this, that East Ayrshire and Scottish Borders have been involved throughout the process, and as part of the local plan district group, all three councils work together with SEPA and Scottish Water. And in terms of New Cumnock, precisely, there's a catchment group that's being set up at the moment, which will involve East Ayrshire, so they'll be looking at their scheme. We're looking at Kirkconnell, we're looking further down the river as well. So it is fully involved in that process.
Thanks so much for that. James, the second point.
Yeah, I mean, I think can we take that one offline? I'll speak to you after the meeting about that one in particular. Thank you.
Happy to do that, and thanks to SEPA for the comforting advice.
Okay, thanks for that, Jim. Finlay.
Thanks, Chair. Just say I welcome the recommendation that we'll have a natural flood study carried out in the D Ken catchment. I'm somewhat surprised that nowhere in that report there's anything mentioning Scottish Power. As one of the major stakeholders and ultimately responsible for the water levels right down that catchment area, I'm surprised when we come to funding, and the funding comes to something like £482,000, there's no mention of the involvement of Scottish Power, other than saying that there's a commitment to work with private and public sector landowners. So that's a bit surprising, considering the control of the water levels they do have. My main point is regarding Cosfern and 2.6 in the recommendations to agree to further develop work on the flood study. This is almost word for word what we agreed in July, and we've still got a report sitting on a shelf gathering dust. There's no time scales to it. I think the folk of Cosfern deserve to have some sort of time scale as to when this is going to be carried out, when we're going to have a plan which gives us costings on the table to look at, because we're not just looking at Scottish Government funding or council funding. There's also a willingness within the community to look at how the community can raise money, but they want to do it, and they want to do it now. We don't want to see this delayed further. So I'd like to see some time scales put into recommendation 2.6 to give the community some reassurance that it's not going to sit on the shelf for another year with nothing done. I think the fact that it's been flooded twice in 3 years, and the vast majority, nearly every single property in Cosfern was flooded in December, and all the warning signs were there that it was going to happen again. I'd like some time commitment to be added to that recommendation.
Ian?
Thanks,
Do you want to
Jim.
answer that just now, or want to come back to the recommendation about timescales? Do you have a timescale at all, James, or is this something we have to bring back? But I will get you to answer it as part of the recommendation. We can have a think about if we do have any indicative timescale. I appreciate it's not part of of the detail of what we're recommending in terms of the action plan. But if we ever think about timescales on that, it'd be helpful. Ian, do you want to come in just now?
Thanks, Chairman. Just very briefly in regards to the point that Councillor Dick brought up earlier, of the relationship with Scottish Water. To try and put that into context, a property local to myself was inundated with water in and around the New Year time when we had that major flood then, and it was caused by the lack of capacity within the local combined sewer. That came back. Now, Scottish Water have been really good in regards to that. They've done an excellent bit of work looking at putting in a non-return valve, stroke reflux valve to try and accommodate and stop that happening again. But in the wider aspect, and it was brought up, we used to have a bit of an influence in regards to the potential investment as we went forward. But I don't know how that works, and we seem to have lost that. It's gone in the ether. What is our best way in regards to influencing Scottish Water's investment plan, and are we doing anything proactively to actually encourage them, looking at, in particular, members' concerns, the areas that they get brought to their attention by their constituents?
I mean, I'm obviously pleased to hear, Ian, that you've had some, or your constituents had some positive response from Scottish Water in terms of reducing internal property flooding. I know that internal property flooding is a particular driver for Scottish Water in the current capital investment strategy going forward. Previously, I think that Scottish Water have been heavily focused in probably since their establishment, or probably even back to the days of West of Scotland Water, very much on water quality issues, service improvements, wastewater treatment works and such like. With the advent of the local flood risk management, the flood risk management processes and them as a responsible authority, there has been very much a push towards supporting in terms of reducing flood risk from the sewer network, the areas that they're responsible for. We, as I've said, in Dumfries and Galloway have two elements of work that the local authority will lead on in conjunction with Scottish Water in Dumfries and Annan for surface water management. But generally across the region, we will work with them on other things. So larger flood protection schemes. So, for example, White Sands, Newton Stewart or Langham, we will engage directly with them on those projects. But actually, in terms of investment and how they choose to sewer network investments and flood risk issues, I'm not aware of us having a direct in on sort of more major issues beyond the larger flood protection schemes.
Okay, no, thanks for that. I thought that was the answer that I would get. I mean, I think we used to have through the local development plans a large number of years ago, we used to have a bit of an influence, but I think that's long lost now. It's about developers installing that level of infrastructure. But I think members, it's about making sure we've got the appropriate measures in place and contacts in regards to when members do have problems, we can raise them at the highest level, whether it's with Scottish Water directly or the ministers above or through committee, whatever it takes. I appreciate it. It's the answer I expected to get from James. No, thanks for that, Chairman.
I can just confirm, ladies and gentlemen, that we did have, and we do have extensive discussions with Scottish Water in relation to the local development plan, and these are ongoing. I have contacts at senior level in Scottish Water where if we do have barriers and issues, then hopefully I can unlock these, and if there is anything particular that you feel has not been addressed, if you please let us know, and we'll take that up. Thank you.
Patsy?
Yes, it's just when we've got a gentleman from SEPA here, I wonder if he could help with regards to the White Sands project, which is underway at the moment, and I see in Appendix 3 that it's due for completion in August and come to committee in September. And I'm just wondering, as a result of the really bad floods that happened this winter, if we have any idea, if you model anything, that when you put up walls, walkways, whatever you do as a flood prevention thing, do you have any way of modelling out where the water will go? Because the water doesn't disappear. It's not like a fire, you don't put it out. The water is there and it's got to go somewhere. And I just wondered if when we look at the final design, completion of the design in August or September, if we can see what the implications of the design are on on the water. And I wonder how you do that, whether you do that, James, or whether it's done in conjunction with SEPA.
Partly, it is an incredibly important point about flood protection schemes, and one that I'll reiterate that we have given this serious consideration for White Sands, because not surprisingly, if you don't flood the White Sands, then it's going to make it worse at Nunham, it's going to make it worse at Kingham, it's going to make it worse everywhere else. Actually, with White Sands, because of the nature of constraining the flow by defences, particularly along the riverside through White Sands down into the Dock Park, the velocities increase, and by increasing the velocities, and not significantly, by increasing the velocities, effectively you get more water passing downstream. So interestingly, the flood levels that we get at if we take the Burns Cinema on the other side, the Burns Centre on the other side of the river, the flood levels are shown to be almost identical, in fact just slightly lower once you built the project than before you built the project. And I know it seems incongruous that this is the case. What we found with the White Sands in particular, that downstream of the call, there are no problems in terms of increased water levels. We can with a computer model that shows the current situation and the water levels, they then build into that computer model, they put in the defences at the heights we're building them at to see what the water levels are like at each of the cross sections down the river, and there's no change downstream of the call. Upstream of the call, we had a problem. We had a problem that we increased the water level slightly by about 50 millimetres at maximum. Now, that in terms of whether a property floods or doesn't flood is not going to be the difference. The properties at upstream of Dumfries town centre that are not protected as part of the scheme, so Goldie Crescent, for example, which is at very, very low risk in comparison to White Sands, flood levels will be slightly higher. Now, we don't want that to be the situation, so actually we've resolved that by doing a small amount of work in the town centre, small amount of work on the river, and it involves removal of the debris that's built up under one of the arches of the Devergilla Bridge. And simply by removing that material that's built up over time under the easternmost arch, under the townside arch, then that has the positive effect of reducing the levels upstream by about 50 millimetres. So it actually negates any disbenefit that the scheme has. Now, that work of removal of gravel under the bridge is not worth doing in itself. By reducing, if a property is flooded to 0.5 metre deep, 50 millimetres is not really much of a difference. But as part of the scheme, to give assurances to everybody involved in the project, everybody upstream and downstream, that we're not making it worse, part of the White Sands project involves reducing the material from underneath the easternmost arch of Devergilla Bridge. And just for your information, that's obviously part of our discussions with Historic Environment Scotland to ensure that work is acceptable to them, given its status as a scheduled monument.
Interesting. If you do it on a computer, can that be brought here, and can we see, or is that not possible? Is it, because it's quite difficult to envisage how things will work. And I think people understand it better if they see it rather than hear it, if I'm being honest. And they can understand it better how it will be affected if you remove the gravel from under that bridge. That's great. I mean, that's a very simple solution. But I just wonder how.
I think it'll. In terms of that level of detail, I think that's quite a hard thing to generate in terms of sort of like some sort of computer, CGI kind of graphics or anything like that. I suspect it probably could be done if you were prepared to spend a significant amount of work on tech guys to build that kind of model. And it's pretty dull for me to show you spreadsheets showing before and afterwards, and just take my word for it. And I acknowledge it's pretty dull for me as well. So it's going to be difficult to show that. But what we can do is we can certainly look at maybe some way of better explaining that, and I'll discuss that with Michelle, who are our lead in terms of hydraulic modelling and scheme design.
It is when people, you talk about, sorry, Chair, through you, it is what people say, where's the water going to go? The water's there, it's not disappearing, it doesn't evaporate, it's not getting stopped, it's got to go somewhere. And somehow people have got to understand where it's going. And that's just what really happens.
If you picture the water running through the Nith, if you go down there at times of flood, and I think it's quite important to do this to just understand The water that's running in the river channel is moving extremely fast. What's running across the White Sands itself, across the car park, across the road, particularly if you stand outside at the top end of the sand, you'll see the water is very static. It's really just sitting there and not, I wouldn't suggest by any means that anybody walks into that water, but that water is not flowing fast. It's moving downstream, but not with any great velocities. It's not transferring a lot of water downstream. It's like taking an broken old pipe that effectively the roughness of the pipe slows the water down, so it takes more time for it to get through. If you make that very smooth, then it goes much faster. And that's really what we've done. You've not got that big wide area that's very shallow. You've got it much more constrained, and therefore the velocities increase slightly, and that's why the impacts are not as people suspect. Oh, well, if it doesn't flood the sands, then it's just going to go straight through my front door. Well, actually, it's not, and it's a very important matter for us.
I think this is one of the challenges we've got with the project, is that there is so much misinformation out there that it's just going to flood elsewhere, and the fact that the velocity will speed up, and even just the point about the work around the Devergilla Bridge, the campaign against the project consistently says, isn't it terrible you've got this build-up next to Devergilla Bridge, but actually part of the project is to remove that build-up, but that message isn't getting across at the moment, and people are continuing to spread what is frankly a campaign of misinformation on the project, and it's difficult to counter that. So we do have to look at how we can counter that as best we possibly can, and without the use of spreadsheets and all sorts of things, to make it as simple as possible, because the reality is the explanation James gives does show why that it will not require, or it will not result in significant flooding elsewhere, but that message isn't across at the moment, partly because unfortunately there's a lot of misinformation out there. Yeah, I think, Craig, do you want to come in on this point? Is it on this point, George? Yeah.
Point, Chair. It's just a sort of follow-up from what Patsy was saying. With the increased water going down, and if we're putting all that water down a narrower channel, do we know what effect it's going to have on the walls further downstream? Obviously, the water's going to be having a bigger effect on down, towards the Dock Park. What effect is it going to have on the walls down there, and and the actual speed of the water going down?
George, it's a very fair point, and one we need to be mindful of in terms of increasing the velocities and whether that has a scour effect on the bridges or on the retaining walls along the riverside. Realistically, the velocity increase is pretty small. It's enough to reduce the flood levels, but it is unlikely that it will change how we will continue to do our structures maintenance on this stretch of water. The Michael Street Bridge, for example, its foundations on rock have obviously shown it to be withstanding for all velocities of flow being passing through there, and we will continue to do dive inspections as and when necessary on that, and we will continue to maintain the riverside walls as we do it at present. I see no change in that. As much as I can allay your concerns, I do not have concerns about the minor increase in velocities creating further problems downstream. But we'll continue with our biannual inspection of bridges as we currently do, and post-flood event inspections as we currently do, and works of maintenance as we currently do to the walls and the bridges.
Okay, Craig.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just in relation to the other two projects within the first cycle of the plan, i.e. Newton, Stewart and Langham, as we develop these projects and firm them up, and as we get to the stage of a preferred option, shall we say, in taking flood defences in these areas forward, at that stage, will we be going out to public consultation as similar to we did at the White Sands? I mean, I appreciate that, of course, they're on a lot smaller scale. But I was just wondering if we will be going out in the various communities there to public consultation on that, or will that then be taken just through the planning process as you apply for that and the consultation done through that method?
I think with Dumfries and White Sands project, we've been looking at a much larger public realm improvement project and it's done in a different way. Certainly with Newton Stewart, we have a flood action group there, and we look to work closely with them on the project. We're not talking about a flood action group or community councils or such like designing the scheme in terms of offering us opinion on how thick the walls need to be to withstand the loadings and things like that. But very much we would like to engage with the community long, as we did with White Sands project, long before we present them with the final solution. I think with Newton Stewart, we're obviously more advanced than we are with Langham. We have some ideas on what we would like to do, and just to come back perhaps on something, if that's okay with you, Chair, come back on something that I didn't pick up with Councillor Geddes, that was with respect to the scheme that we're looking for Newton Stewart. We are looking to go as high a level of protection as we can possibly get, keep the cost as low as possible, and achieve a high level of protection. So as previously reported to this committee, we're talking about a 1 in 10 year level of protection. We're looking to much more like a 1 in 75 to 1 in 100 year level of protection in that scheme. That's critical for us to get a scheme that's going to give confidence to the businesses and community there. So we would do engagement with that. We would then go through the statutory processes we will with the White Sands project in terms of advertising the scheme, in terms of the Flood Risk Management Act and that process. But I would hope to be bringing these guys on board all the way through the process rather than just fait accompli.
That, James. Okay, any other questions? Okay, members, can we turn to the recommendations then? Page 39. Members, happy to note 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, to agree 2.4, 2.5, 2.6, and I think on 2.6 though we were looking, I gave James lots of time to come up with the answer to this one, but Stephen's going to give us the answer about a timescale around the Casfairn flood study.
Yeah, in terms of a timescale for all this work, I think effectively what we're seeing here is a programme of work over a 6-year period. What I don't think we're in a position to do as a team just now is actually say where an individual piece of work will fall within that 6 years. What I would suggest is that we maybe have a look at the resources over that period of time, the priorities that we've committed to deliver in terms of the flood protection schemes and the additional work over the local flood risk management plan. Where 2.7, the recommendation, are due to come back to this committee with a short report and a link to the final local flood risk management plan. I would suggest that we could come back at that point, and if members wanted to agree a detailed programme of what we're going to do in that 6 years, we could provide that within that committee report.
Can I just add one other thing? I think it is quite important, and with SEPA sitting next to me here, and they don't work for Scottish Government, but they'll kick me in the same way as Scottish Government will. If we consider paragraph 3.37 in the report, we do have a duty to deliver what is in the local flood risk management plan. If we get distracted from that delivery, and distracted in the best ways, dealing with Casfairn or dealing with other issues that arise over the next 6 years, then what we're doing is we're moving away from a plan-led risk-based approach. We're not saying that the plan-led risk-based approach that we've started in 2011 and progressing forward is perfect, but the constant jump in between and moving on to stuff. But there is a legislative requirement to deliver on what is in the local flood risk management plan. So we have Casfairn there in our local flood risk management plan, but we also have Newton Stewart, we also have Langham, we have White Sands, and we have delivery of works and studies around the region in terms of setting up for the following cycle where we may look to deliver projects there. So we need to be mindful that we don't distract that or don't take our resources away. And I would just caveat any delivery on that basis as well.
So I find that completely unacceptable. We agreed back in 14th of July last year that at the time the completion of a flood study to allow consideration of options. What is the point of having recommendations in the paper if we actually got no intention to carry them out? It's completely unacceptable. The people of Casfairn, we had 30 houses there flooded. We've got a flood scheme that's proposal that's sitting on the shelf gathering dust. Most of the work's been done. we've got a community that's actually willing to look at funding this on itself, and we've got a timescale of sometime in the next 6 years. I think it's unacceptable considering the decisions we've taken at past committees to progress this, but there's no timescales and what it's going to be done.
Okay, I think what's been said though is that in the report in June we'll have a sort of indicative timescale around the action plan and any other additional projects over and above the action plan. But I think members take on board the point regarding the need to deliver the action plan. But I think that will be contained within the report in June. Members are happy with that, including the timescales. Okay, happy to note 2.7 then, and 2.8. Okay, thanks to David for his attendance today. He got off very lightly today. You know, I should have told people in advance he was coming, but thanks very much anyway, David. Cheers. Okay, members, can we turn now to item number 8, which is further supplementary guidance for the local development plan. Can I ask the Director if there's anything he wishes to add to the report before members?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can I open it up to members? Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. Page 85, sir, talking about Scottish Water and general comments. I would have to say that council response, it's maybe something of an embellishment. We're talking about comments are noted in Scottish Water advice is considered in all development proposals. No, it's no, Chair, because as a member of the Planning Applications Committee, I'm sure those colleagues here today, you know, who serve on that committee with me, would take the view that all too often, and indeed I've raised it, you know, not all that long ago, all too often you see in the rubric Scottish Water, no reply received. And, you know, I think it's a bone of contention. It's certainly a bone of contention to the council's professional planners that too often, in fact, that is the response that they have to put in the report. Minor point, Chair, but as I say, I think at the end of the day, one in which over which we are justified in holding Scottish Water going forward to more account than perhaps we have done in the past.
No, don't think there's need to really reply, but that's a valid point, I think. Unless Steve wants to add anything to it. No. Okay. Ian?
Just briefly, because in recommendation 2.2, it just refers to agreeing that my preference would have actually been to see the amendments incorporated into the developers' contributions I'm talking about there, Chairman. The whole amendment, I would like to see the supplementary planning guidance here as amended, rather than just saying that we agree to these amendments, that will be put forward, and I think we're later remitting that with powers to Steve and his team to go on and just submit that to ministers and for it to be agreed. It just would have helped me put it into context rather than going back and forward between the documents. But I think unless I've got that picked it up wrong, Chairman, that's how I've read through the comments, but as we can see, we've got one to agree before that in regards to residential annexes. It would be quite nice to have actually seen the supplementary planning guidance incorporated in here with the amendments already in it, so we've seen it in black and white. But I think we've just, unless I've got that wrong, it's not a real criticism, but it would have made it easier for me, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, I think the proposed responses and amendments are contained in the appendix, but I don't know if Steve wants to add anything to this.
Chair, thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is the standard way in which we present supplementary guidance after it's been out for consultation, rather than reprinting the entire document. Again, the subsequent report focuses on the proposed modifications and changes. The original developer contribution supplementary guidance went to the previous committee, so the changes should just be cross-referenced back to the draft that members signed off at the previous meeting.
Yeah, I've got Jim. Yeah, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's regarding some of the responses that have been made to the consultation and what we're proposing to do. It's nice to see that we appear to have moved some way to actually recognising that it's not actually just RSLs that will be providing affordable housing in the future. I did bring it up at the time and was more or less told, well, unless it's an RSL or it's in the ship, you've got no chance of it not being having to contribute. But can I just have some absolute clarity? Page 87, the proposed modification, it says basic method for calculation and education and community facility exclusion sections to read one-bedroom units, sheltered housing and affordable housing developments where the developer can demonstrate that the housing is supported by a public subsidy. Now, if the Scottish Government or even the UK Government was to give a developer a direct contribution, surely that is demonstrating housing supported by public subsidy, and there would be absolutely no argument that they would be one of the exceptions.
Yeah, that's the intention. The whole intention here was essentially to avoid a situation where we're just taking from one element of the public purse to fund another element of the public purse. The whole notion of developer contributions is to ensure that private developers pay towards the impact on the public purse of their schemes.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Thinking in worst case scenarios where the developer can demonstrate. Who decides whether he's demonstrated it actually to the satisfaction of the council? And if the council decides that he hasn't demonstrated it, is there an appeals process?
Well, each case obviously would be assessed on a case-by-case basis by the planning officer. If the developer is not willing to accept the outcome of that, then that would be fed into ultimately the eventual decision on the planning application. So there's an appeal route against decisions on planning applications, either against refusals of planning permission or indeed against imposition of conditions, because the developer might disagree with the imposition of a condition, or alternately, if it's a Section 75, they have a right of appeal to vary or change a Section 75 provision. So there are various routes that a developer could follow.
Any other members? Okay, can we turn into recommendations? Members happy to agree 2.1? Okay, and we've considered the responses. We're happy to agree the Council's recommended response and proposed modifications. Alistair?
Can I suggest, sir, standing my earlier remarks, that the proposed response, as it were, in relation to the Scottish Water advice, is amended somewhat to reflect the reality? And if you want to, if you want to couple it, sir, with an exhortation that they should be responding much more frequently than they do, I wouldn't be averse to that either.
Okay. So that comment's very well noted. 2.3, are we happy to remit with powers to the head of planning, etc.? Yeah. Okay. 2.4, to adopt the developer contribution, etc. Happy? Yeah. And 2.5, to note. Ian?
Just on that, what does that mean, Chairman? Because I'm at education on Thursday as well, so we'll talk about it there again. But just so we're absolutely clear what we're agreeing, we've already agreed that, so we're beyond that point. When I've read paragraph 373.9, got my understanding of it. Just from Steve's point, or Shona's point, just in regards, what does that mean to them? Is that something that's coming back? If we agree in principle that whatever education department defines as correct, that is what we accept? What is it we're saying?
Chair, yes, thank you. Essentially what we're saying is recognising that it's within the remit of the Council's Education Committee to review the capacities, school capacities. They then form the basis for the appendix. If you recall, the draft supplementary guidance had an appendix with a list of every single primary school and secondary school. That table will have to be completely redone once the Education Committee has agreed the revised school capacities. So rather than delay this supplementary guidance being finalised, we're simply saying that we need to sit down with our colleagues from the Education Service and reflect in the supplementary guidance the outcome of that decision of the Education Committee.
Okay, Ian?
Just to come back on that point, the point I raised last time, I just need my concerns alleviated, because he looked at Anne and it looked like you're going to have to cover the 4 primary schools and the secondary school. Like there's got to be major levels of developers' contributions compared to potentially other settlements. And that's the point I just need appeased on, I suppose, when it certainly my concerns relieved when it comes to that being the case. Because I wouldn't want one settlement to have a disproportionate level of the developers' contribution compared to another, unless there is some real statistics that would justify that.
Chair, I think that's why we're holding off finalising this until we actually have the facts from the Education Service in terms of school capacities to ensure that it's based on the most up-to-date evidence that they have.
Okay, members, happy with that? Okay, thank you very much. Can we turn now to item number 9, which is a proposed response to the Scottish Government's consultation on draft plan and delivery advice around housing and infrastructure. Can I ask the Director if there's anything he wishes to add to the report?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, members, can I open it up for any questions or comments? Members happy to agree the response? Okay, Finlay? Sorry, Jim. Finlay.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just about the details on 3.9 and 3.10 about deallocations of sites and considering whether the ability of local developers, landowners and local planning regarding sites that are in LDPs. I'm fully aware that there is sites in the current LDP for the Stranraer area that were in the previous local plans and have been for some time, and there hasn't been, for the want of a better word, a sod turned in them. Are they actually viable? Should we not be looking at actually deallocating them? If they're in the plan and they're not being developed and haven't been developed, no even for the local plan, are they actually ever going to be developed? And is there other sites that aren't in the plan that are actually more suitable?
Chair, yeah, all good questions and ones that will be addressed as part of the review of the LDP and bringing forward LDP 2. I think this draft advice from Scottish Government is welcome because it does firm up the whole process around assessing whether sites are actually going to be delivered, and the methodology that we need to apply has got to be consistent as well as rigorous, so that we're operating a fair and equitable approach in assessing all of the sites that are in the plan. And certainly the advice that's contained within this draft from Scottish Government is welcome in that respect, because it does re-emphasise that the focus, and this is really the whole message that's coming across through this advice note, is that the whole focus within development plans now has got to be about facilitating the actual delivery of sites. It's not really just simply any longer a numbers game or a site allocation approach. We've actually got to go the next step further in terms of our action plans to engage much more closely with landowners, developers and builders to facilitate the actual future development of sites.
Thanks for that, Steve. Thanks for that, Jim. Okay, members happy to agree the response? Okay, thank you very much, and thanks to Steve and Shona for taking questions on the last 2 items. Okay, members, can we turn now to item number 10, which is Dumfries and Galloway Regional Tourism Strategy 2016 to 2020, and the report aims to seek members' approval on the strategy. Can I ask the Director if there's anything he wishes to add to the report before members?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can I open it up to members' questions or comments? Patsy?
Well, I just had one thought. We have had tourism strategies before, and I presume we've had visions. Well, I know we've had visions and missions and delivery. We don't really know how they've worked. Have we, you've got down here, your mission is to increase the value of tourism from 300 million to 330 million. What was in the previous? tourist strategy? Have we met that? Because it's all very well having these visions and things. It's whether we actually achieve them or not. And I'm, in 2021 or 2020? Whoever's sitting here looking at the next one, will we know if we've achieved the last one? And it's quite important that we do have a method by which we can see whether what we're doing is achieving what we're setting out to do. I just wonder what you thought about that.
Thank you. The action plans that will actually be developed from the regional tourism strategy will then be reported back through the Environment and Infrastructure Committee reporting through the business plan. So the idea of those is that we actually do have measurable targets, and you'll see from the committee report that we've actually brought those indicators down to be fairly focused so that we can actually measure them against the regional tourism strategy that we're putting in place to be supported along with the tourism sector. So the idea is that, yes, very much so, the action plans will allow us to report on the achievements of the overall strategy.
That'll be something that will happen on a regular basis rather than at the end of the 2020. We'll obviously get those reports every 6 months. Okay, Finlay.
Thanks. Excuse me. Building the capacity is the sort of action points you've got. There's no, under infrastructure, you've got transport, but there's no indication of things like businesses that are having issues with A75 or the trunk roads where signage is almost impossible to get or costs a lot of money and takes a long time to get installed. And also the issues we have with tourism businesses right along the A75 with access, where we've got an example of one tourism business which is likely to have quite an impact on the number of visitors that visit the area, expected to pay something like £250,000 for road access in A75, which they appear to be getting very little support. It's a very difficult issue. We've got businesses right along there, whether it's Auchenary Holiday Park, the Coca Bean, Lagan Outdoor, Moss Yard. There's a stretch where there seems to be a lack of joined up thinking between the Scottish Government and our local tourism strategy, where these businesses are expected to fork out, as I say, £250,000 for road access. What sort of things can the council do with regards to lobbying and whatever to get support for these businesses?
Thank you. I think it's a really good point, and part of I think why this strategy is needed and why it's specifically talking about infrastructure is that very point that we need to be able to lobby and push a lot harder with national agencies around the infrastructure of the A75. And I know the business you're talking about and the other ones. And this issue of signage has come up before from members that we're committed to looking at and reviewing. And certainly, I think what we need to be clear as a council and a tourism sector is that this is the infrastructure improvements is a fundamental issue for us. Therefore, this sets out our position from which to lobby. So it's a very good point and one that's not lost on us in terms of taking forward the strategy.
Chair, if I can just add, the example that you raised, we've worked very closely with them in engaging the Scottish Government through Transport Scotland to assist. And I think during the current closure, it's out there for works that are being doing. We're ensuring that a survey is carried out to get an actual cost on what may be required rather than an estimated cost. So we are working positively. Absolutely essential. These sort of developments are absolutely crucial and critical to our future economic sustainability.
Ian.
Thanks, Chairman. I think it's a really good piece of work. I just wondered, the question that popped into my mind, because this is about the economy, it goes on about the 302,007,000 jobs there or nearabouts, but a question that keeps getting raised with myself, with people in rural areas, is what is Dumfries and Galloway Council doing for the rural economy when it comes to helping them develop their business and so on and so forth, round about tourism? So I just wonder what are the links in regards to this. It's a question, like I say, it's come up quite a few times in regards to this and this document, how it may be applied in regards to the local development plan, for instance. other links there? Have you had the discussions with the development plan team and so on and so forth? Because it's a question that keeps getting raised with myself, so I'm just wondering if you've got any remarks in regards to that. Chair?
Thank you. Colleagues from development planning have been involved with the consultation process for the strategy. They will also be involved in developing and then supporting the action plans that come out of this on an annual basis. Just to take your first point, if I may, one of the key things that we've put into our European Regional Development application, which we're hoping to hear by the end of this month on, is how we can, through the next... That wasn't me. How we can actually dovetail that with supporting individual businesses, because that's very much about what the RDF application is about, is how we support growing businesses. And that will be developing leadership programs, strategy programs, social media development, that we will actually go out and do that with the growing businesses through that program. So we have very much focused that where we can support individual businesses looking to grow.
Oh, much appreciated. I know that certainly Ian and Chris and his team obviously work hard.
Much for that. Sorry, Ian, do you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. I brought a motion up at this full council sometime last year, which was passed unanimously, to develop tourist routes, primarily the coastal tourist route. Now, that was promoted and supported by the Wigtonshire Chamber of Commerce, and I note in 3.7 that apparently they were, Wigtonshire Chamber of Commerce were consulted. Now, that was one of their primary tourist drivers, and it doesn't appear anywhere in this, and it certainly doesn't appear in the glossy document we've been given. Can I ask what's been done since this council passed that motion to try and promote a coastal tourist route and not take people up the current tourist route up into Ayrshire? What's been done and why it's not featured in here? Because, quite frankly, it raises questions of the veracity of any consultations when the Wigtonshire Chamber of Commerce were directly concerned that was one of the primary drivers for the improvement of tourism in this region.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the actual tourism strategy, this is very much a high-level document, and the key pieces of work that will come out on an annual basis with the groups that will be involved in developing the action plans are the pieces of work that they want taken forward. One of the things that has been absolutely crucial to the development of the strategy is that the tourism sector themselves have been closely involved and very heavily involved in the consultation process. And that will also be the same in developing the strategies on the action plans on a year-by-year basis. So we would be taking, if it's approved today, we will be taking this forward. It is very much an industry and a sector document, and the sector will then come forward with the key pieces of work that they want to be supported through the action plans that are developed, on an annual basis.
Sure, yeah, no, fine.
Well, if that's the case, then I would like very much, given that this council passed that resolution, that should feature primarily in any future tourism strategy documents. I think fundamentally that was a very key one, and I would call it strategic.
Thanks for that, Ian. I think as Chris makes clear, this is obviously the overarching document that sets out the vision and the main targets for the tourism strategy, and obviously what will follow is the detailed action plan. But what we're obviously being asked to agree today is the overarching document. Finlay?
Thanks for letting me in again. Obviously this is overarching and it's to be welcomed. Again, it's a good report. How do you foresee the leadership and collaboration, the very bottom part? How are you going to be proactive as a council to approach businesses, or how is the whole collaboration going to work? How are we going to get the businesses, because we all know it's a bit like the art sector, it's like herding cats. How are we going to actually engage with them? Because in the past we've had Dumfries and Galloway, Destination Dumfries and Galloway, which had limited success. How are you going to address getting all these business people? Because I realise you've got a whole list of partnership working and who you've worked with, but there's obviously some gaps in there, or smaller organisations or whatever that may want to get involved. How are you going to collaborate with these folk to pull everybody forward?
Thank you. I think taking it back to the fact that it is the tourism sector's strategy and the action plans, clearly, as the local authority, we are key in supporting that rather than leading it. One of the key things, again, that we're going to be doing, and we've put in our ERDF application, is sectoral support, one of which is the tourism sector. And part of the animation of that programme, which, again, we would hope to start very much developing from April onwards, is doing, if you like, workshops across the region where we will invite tourism businesses, tourism organisations to come to that so that we can actually develop where they are seeking support from the local authority in whether it's skills development, employment opportunities, right down to developing gross profit and all those sort of things, marketing, promotions, and linking those in as well to the marketing interest group that we developed and lead on with Visit Scotland. So it's very much about us going out to animate that programme to see where we as a local authority can support both what we can do and also support different groups within the sector who will come forward themselves wanting to take the lead on certain areas from the action plans.
Okay, any other members? Okay, can we turn to the recommendations? Are members happy to approve and also to agree 2.2? Okay, thanks. And I think we should place on record our thanks to officers, but also crucially to the industry in the region who have obviously been heavily involved in developing this document. Obviously, we look forward to the detailed action plan around the Council's action, but I think it's important to stress this is a tourism industry vision and document, not just a Council document, and obviously they will be crucial in taking it forward and also the ambitious targets. So I think we should place that on record, and thanks very much to the team. Okay, members, can we turn now to item number 11, which is on an objection to the proposed speed limit order for Dalbeattie. Can I ask the Director if there's anything he wishes to add to the report before members?
Nothing to add, but just to introduce Chief Inspector Neil Hewitson, who's here from the police to answer any questions.
Okay, Jim? Yeah.
I can't exactly find what point or order it actually is, but we made a decision on the 10th of November 2015. That's less than 6 months ago. Standing order say, can he change the decision within 6 months?
It's not quite what standing order say, but I think it's actually not. It's the fact that we've now advertised the order and there's been an objection to that order and we've been asked to consider that objection. Would that be right, John? Yeah. Okay, so we've now published the order and we're now being asked to obviously consider the objection to that order. Any members' questions? It would be helpful if we asked Neil to outline what the detail of the objection is, what the main concern is. Would that be helpful to members?
Intrinsically, the difficulty with this particular order is that we don't feel that there will be compliance by drivers slowing down to 30 miles an hour. Mean speeds have been measured at 40 miles an hour, and what we would be creating is an enforcement issue here. We don't have any injury crash rate at this particular location, which would indicate a need for us to have a 30 miles an hour speed limit. I have never objected to any other speed limits before that have been raised here, so this is not something that I do lightly. And but I feel on this occasion that 40 miles an hour would be the correct speed for this location.
Members' questions? George?
Chair, is the new plan any different, or the new order any different on the ground from what came to committee in November? Or is it just basically exactly the same?
Thanks, Chair.
Just the reasoning behind that is finding it very difficult to understand the report, you know, when it goes on about south and north and east and west, and, you know, for 150 years. I found it quite hard. I think we should just have a site visit in this one.
Chair, thanks. The difference between the most recent advertised order, which included a 30 mile per hour speed limit, is hopefully shown on Appendix 3, which is the plan of this length of road. The southernmost part from where it says Biggers Mill Business Park southwards to where it says Dalbeattie Wood Car Park is advertised as a 30 mile per hour speed limit in the most recent order. In the previous order, that was a 40 mile per hour speed limit order. The difference on the ground would be at the change from at Biggers Mill Business Park, where at the moment that's where the 30 mile per hour speed limit starts to the north. With the previous order, you would have come in from Dalbeattie Wood from the south, you would have met signs that say 40 miles per hour, you'd have carried on up, there would have been repeater signs along there to say 40 miles per hour. You get to that transition point where the 30 starts at the moment, and there would be signs that say 30 miles per hour as it is at the moment, and that takes you into the rest of the town. And conversely, if you travel in the other direction, if it's a 30 mile per hour order throughout, you reach signs at the bottom at Dalbeattie Wood Car Park, and that's the first signs, and that says 30 miles per hour, and that's there would be no intermediate signs at Biggers Mill Business Park. So that's the fundamental differences that would actually apply on the ground.
Okay, George? Quite straightforward to me.
Yeah.
Let's look at the map, George. Looks straightforward to me. Jim?
Yeah, Chair, thanks for that. Going through the objections at 3.9, the guidance is guidance. The statement, there will be widespread non-compliance. It's likely, you can't prove it. The enforcement of the speed limit and the currently unrestricted road length will not be a priority, given the lack of reported injury accidents. And there's been no objections previously. One of my colleagues has pointed out that the police had no objections to extending the 30 mile limits on the fast stretch of road, including the A745 into Castle Douglas. When the Whitelaw estate was built, that's a fast stretch of road with a housing estate set back off the road and fields on the opposite side. Quite similar to the situation we're in here. But I'll take it back to my own word. The police did not object to extending the 30 mile an hour speed limits in Cairnryan from the Breakers Yard to north of what is now the roundabout at Stena Terminal. The average speed on that stretch of road would be well above 40 before they extended the speed limits, and there is absolutely no buildings on the extension part of the road. So we seem to be playing devil's advocate here. We're not going to do this one, but we don't object to other ones. There's been no injury accidents. Yet there was no injury accidents on that bit of the A77 between the Breakers Yard and what is now the new roundabout. Why did we not object? Or sorry, why did the police not object under the same circumstances as what they're objecting here? Because the extension of the speed limit at Cairnryan was in a better situation than what this is. This has at least got houses round about it. The extension at Cairnryan had no houses round about it, absolutely none. I think I've actually just about said enough. My proposal would be we go with the decision that we made on the 10th of November 2015 that it's a 30 mile an hour limit. We've already considered it. We go with what we decided in November.
With regards to Cairnryan, you'll find that the roundabout that was put in at the port at Cairnryan was designed for a 30 speed limit there. So traffic calming measures were implemented there to try and introduce a 30. We did make observations to Transport Scotland at the time the road was engineered there, and we were assured that the engineering that had taken place at that particular time would limit the speed to 30 miles an hour. With regards to Whitelaw, there are no houses with frontages on the bypass at Dalbeattie, which is different from Whitelaw Industrial Estate area. There is frontage there,
and there are no alternatives for people walking in from the 745 at Whitelaw into Castle Douglas. There are no alternative routes for pedestrians to walk along there.
Yeah, regarding the traffic calming measures that were put in the 77, the only traffic calming measure was a great big roundabout stuck at the entrance of Stena. There was absolutely no other work carried out in the 77 from north of Cairnryan to you actually hit the old breakers yard where the 30-mile-an-hour limit was. There was absolutely no other work done other than the roundabout being put in. Transport Scotland are now going to be putting up extra speed signs, etc., to try and slow the vehicles down, as you're well aware, in Cairnryan. That work is already taking place. But as regarding the extension of the 30-mile-an-hour limit at Cairnryan, other than the roundabout going in so as traffic could peel off into the terminal, there was no work done to the road. Even the road surface wasn't even recovered.
Okay, I think we're starting to delve into Cairnryan rather than Dalbeattie a wee bit there, but obviously I think inspectors made the point about the roundabout. Alistair, do you want to...
Yes, merely to say, sir, that I will, if Councillor McClung is moving the motion, as I understand he is, that I will second it. And I would say in passing that it would be supporting the Community Council's views after all.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Any other members? Okay, we've got a motion from Jim and Alistair. Do we have Patsy?
I would just say I'd go with the recommendations, Chair. Consider, and I would say that we stick with 40 miles an hour at this point.
You're making an amendment to...
Yes.
You're making an amendment, okay.
Yes,
so an amendment from Patsy effectively to agree to implement 40-mile-an-hour speed limit rather than the 30. Would that be correct?
Can I just say,
Sorry,
Chair, I think it's like everything else. I think we get far too many restrictions in our lives, and I think we need to have rules and regulations there that can be enforced. The police have said this is not a high-risk area. There's no evidence of accident. They will not be able to monitor it to the level that perhaps Dalbeattie Community Council want. Therefore, I see no point in changing it.
Amendment from Patsy. Do we have... You'll second that? Okay. Any other members? No? Okay, so we have a motion from Jim and... Oh, sorry, do you want to explain what...
We have a motion put forward by Councillor McClung, which has been seconded by Councillor Geddes, that the Council stick with the decision that was made in November 2015. We have an amendment put forward by Councillor Gilroy and seconded by Councillor Prentice that the Council agree to implement the 40-mile-per-hour speed limit rather than the 30-mile-per-hour speed limit. Can I proceed to the vote?
Okay, motion.
Councillor Smith, motion. Councillor Peacock.
Motion.
Councillor Crothers.
Motion.
Councillor Carson.
Motion.
Councillor Dempster.
Motion.
Councillor Dick.
Motion.
Councillor Foster.
Motion.
Councillor Geddes.
Motion.
Councillor Gilroy. Councillor Groom.
Motion.
Councillor Lever. Councillor McClung.
Motion.
Councillor Mail.
Amendment.
Councillor Martin.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholson.
Motion.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Motion.
Councillor Prentice.
Amendment.
Councillor Tuckfield.
Motion.
And I can confirm that the motion carries from 15 votes to 3 votes.
Very much, members. And I thank Chief Inspector for coming along today. So that's to maintain the decision that was taken at the previous meeting of 30 miles an hour. Okay. Okay, members, can we turn now to item number 12, which is the report on proposed harbour fees and charges at Stranraer Harbour. Can I ask the Director if there's anything he wishes to add to the report before members?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair, but to introduce Keith Armstrong-Clark, who is our Harbour Master. Welcome along to your first committee, I believe.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I open it up to members for any questions? Graham.
Thank you and welcome to the new Harbour Master. You've a hard act to follow. Your predecessor, Peter, was a fine man. I'm pleased to note that you're not charging for the slipway because it's only operational 16 hours a day, 8 hours a day, 16 hours a day the water doesn't reach it. And the 8 hours that could be used, you have to get a digger down to clear the gravel before anybody could use it. So I'm pleased to note that it's free of charge. The charges to me seem in the light side, but I'm not a boat owner. I appreciate the comparisons, etc., what's in front of us. What does concern me is, and this whole exercise was driven by value engineering, we've never had the outrun costs for the hoist or the slipway yet. We were told it was done under value engineering. We don't know what it's cost, and yet here we're agreeing what we're going to charge for using the facilities. If you cast your mind back to last September, I voted we didn't approve the hoist at the time until we saw a full business case. Now we're getting it back to front. We know what we're going to charge for the use of the facilities, but we've yet to receive the figure of what all these cost. My question is to the Director, when will we be in possession of these figures?
I will undertake to ensure that we come back with these details. I can't give you a timeline at this moment in time, but I can assure you that we'll come back.
If I could just say, that really tells me nothing.
Well, I'm sorry that that's your retort. You've asked me a question that I don't have any backup information to be able to give you an answer. We are being recorded, and my answer is that I will come back and advise you when you'll get these costs.
And my question is when?
Well, that's what I'll come back and tell you.
Okay. Alistair.
Thanks, Chair. And the back of Councillor Foster's comment, Graham's comment about, sort of being a bit light, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, sir. When you look at the line which says storage of owner's cradle oblique trailer, Largs is £64 per annum, James Watt £51 for up to 6 months, and we're proposing £50 per month. That, as I say, looks a wee bit steep on the steep side to me, so I'd be grateful perhaps for a response to that, Chair.
Certainly one that stood out for me, but I think Keith, or Stephen, do you want to explain the rationale behind that particular figure? Because I think there is an answer there, Alistair.
Hello, Councillor Geddes. Yes, I see where your comment is coming from in relation to the prices. What we've pitched it, that particular charge, deliberately high, you might say, because what we don't want to have is a hard standing full of trailers, just a trailer park. What we'd like in the hard standing is to have it full of boats on cradles being stored properly, for which we can charge a reasonable fee.
Answer your question, Alistair.
Well, I would commend the officer for his candour, Chair. That
Yeah, just first part is regarding the owners and cradle, and it's a question really. How many of the people that are likely to be using it will have their own cradle and trailer?
This very much depends on the type of boat we're talking about. People who have small motorboats, etc., or in small yachts, quite often will have their own trailer or their own cradles to put the vessel on in the hard standing. The larger vessels, say over about 25, 26 foot, those are the ones where we're going to have to use the cradles that we supply, which will be handled by the boat transporter to take them into the hard standing.
Yeah, thanks. As regarding the actual contents of the report, it actually says that the washdown facility is being considered. As far as I was aware, the washdown facility was actually part of the original plan for the hard standing area. Can you just confirm that it's not being considered? What we're actually trying to do is figure out how it's actually going to be provided. It's not a case of we're considering whether to do it or not.
I think that's the case. Stephen, do you want to just...
Yeah, the detailed solution there is being investigated, and that requires kind of communication with SEPA on the washdown.
Definitely happening. Yeah, Jim.
And just finally, thanks for your forbearance, Chair. As far as I was aware, it was never the intention that we were going to charge for the slipway. It was always going to be a public slipway. I said so publicly at the time, although there was some that actually tried to reinvent it, that it was a slipway for the marina. As regarding the charges, what we're actually trying to do here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is we are actually trying to bring in new winter business to use the actual hard standing, the hoist, and everything else that's on this list. Is there any opportunity? I don't disagree with the charges apart from maybe the £50 a month one for the trailer, but is there any opportunity where we could actually offer the first couple of years at a discount rate to actually get those people into the area? Because once they're here and they're storing their trailers and their boats, the spin-off for the businesses in Stranraer, and it's not just the town centre businesses, you're talking about electricians, you're talking about joiners, etc., who are going to get work on the boats while they're stationed there. Is there any way that we could actually consider a discount for the first 22 months, or maybe 15, 20% to actually get them here? Because once they're here, they'll stay, and they'll pay the rate because they know what Stranraer can actually offer as regarding for working in their boats.
And can I just come back to you? Yeah. In setting the charges, the work that Keith and Graham Allison, the other kind of report author, has done, they've obviously looked at what's happening elsewhere, and they've tried to be commercially competitive to try and draw business in. And the balance of that, again, is also getting an understanding of what the costs are to actually deliver these services. But in time, and as we deliver these services over a period of time, we'll have a better understanding of what the costs are in relation to the charges that committee are asked to agree here. I think what you're suggesting in terms of a promotional discount, it goes beyond what's written in the report, but it probably is quite interesting to consider. We reckon these charges are relatively competitive. The balance is you've got quite a long sail down the loch to actually get into Stranraer. I think it might be appropriate if committee wanted to delegate to the director over and above agreeing these charges, the opportunity to provide a kind of promotional discount, as you say, for a period of time, whether that's a year, whether that's 2 years, and we can look at that in terms of how the business is taken off, and if that was delegated to officers to implement.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that it would be certainly a consideration. I realise when you look through the charges that they are competitive with the other ones. What we need to do, as far as I'm concerned, is for at least the first couple of years, is outcompete them. Get them here. And that means, if it means taking business away from any of the other ones that's listed on there, I don't have a problem with that. My problem is, or my desire is, to get the boatyard and everything else working in Stranraer. If it's taking business for elsewhere, for another region, from another marina, I don't really care. And really the best way to do that is discount it for the first 2 years, because once they get here, they'll not move anywhere else because they know what Stranraer can offer. I'm quite happy if we decide to get to that stage when we're doing the recommendations to actually give it to officers to actually, but I would like some notice back on what the kind of promotional offers that they're actually going to offer, so that we as members can have our input into that before we actually finally decide that that's the way we're going to go.
Do you want to come back on that, Stephen?
I think if members want to decide on the promotional offer, then if we could decide that here at this committee, if we see the charges, if we just decide what the promotional offer is, that would kind of speed the process up.
because I think the next meeting is probably June time, isn't it? So I'll be reluctant to delay it until then. So if members are inclined to support having some sort of discount offer, then I think that's something we should agree today. Do you wish us to agree a particular level, or to delegate that to officers to pursue? Jim?
Me being me, I've actually worked out what a 15% discount and a 20% discount would be for every one of the charges that is actually there. And with the exception of the £50 a month, and the £75 for the hoist hire per hour, you're talking about every one of them is under £10, whether it's 15 or 20. Personally, I would go for the first 2 years for getting them a 20% discount. And let me make it absolutely clear, I am not just proposing that discount for the folk that we actually attract. That is a discount for anybody that is using it for the first 2 years. That's including the folk that are sitting in the harbour at the minute and want to take their boats out, because at the minute this is a new facility and it would be wrong to give a discount to attract new and not actually reward the ones that are actually using the marina at the minute.
Okay, we'll certainly come back to that in the recommendations. Any other members? Sorry, I've got Ian, then Finlay, then Patsy, then Graham.
Thanks, Chair. I would just, if we come to the recommendations and Jim wants to propose that, I would certainly second it. Just in relation to the storage of owners' cradle and trailer, it did look like a typo to start with. Can I just ask what the capacity is there at Stranraer compared to, it seems to be only James Watt and Largs that provide that. What are the comparative capacities?
I don't have those figures to hand. You're talking the number of boats that can be stored in the compound, I presume. No, I don't have those figures to hand, but I can find out for you. I'll do my best to. Certainly, our compound at Stranraer is significantly smaller than it is at, say, at Largs, which is a very large marina.
Thanks, Chair. I agree with Jim that we need to have some sort of promotional offer. You know, if you're changing your car insurance, your telephone insurance, you know, if you use it for the first time, you expect a bonus. And I think with the very nature of what we've got in Stranraer, we're going to have to do something, go that extra mile to get folk to start using it. I don't, however, agree that us sitting here looking at this on the hoof can suddenly come up with the right formula to how we're going to do the pricing over the next 2 years. And I wouldn't be happy sitting deciding 20%, 10%, because there's so many elements to it. We need to look at what the predicted income is for folks storing boats and so on, and base it on that. But I wouldn't be happy certainly setting prices at the moment. But I'm very much in favour of a 1 or a 2 year incentive to move.
Okay, Patsy.
Yes, well, you know, we're always told not to make policy on the hoof, and that's certainly one that's galloping ahead of us at that rate. I'm just wondering when we will get the service review, when that will be concluded, because presumably these prices that have gone in here are just as a stopgap, really, till we get the proper service review done, and we can really see how we're placed. Because presumably, and I would hope, that we've got to assess how much we need to charge in order to recoup the cost and make a profit at the end of the day. And much as I love boats and everything else, they're no different to anything, you know, they're not different to whatever else we provide. We've got to pay their way. And I understand a promotional thing. I get that completely, because you want people there. But you can't run at a loss for too long, and you would prefer not to run at a loss at all, if I'm being perfectly honest. And I don't think we can make that decision on a Women of Prayer today. I really don't. I think we can go with the costs that we've got here, because they are temporary. And then we get the full service review in, and it will show us what we need to charge to lift a boat out of there, if it's £75 or if it's £95. We don't know at the moment. And then we can assess it. But I think we're in muddy water here if we're not careful.
Water, the whole point's to get them out of the water, Patsy, but that's Graham.
We're already sponsoring the marina with cheap berthing charges. any future business case that come in front of us or has been proposed to come in front of us has highlighted this. We're dirt cheap. We're cheap as chips for storing boats in Stranraer. Why should we be the same with lifting them out, in and out of the water? We have a set of table figures in front of us. I move we go with that today. No discount, and I would hope it won't be long before we're looking to raising the charges. We've spent a lot of money. The director can't quantify the amount yet, but I'm sure we'll all get a shock when we see what this slipway and this boat hoist has cost us, and we'll be looking to recoup money. Times are hard. Go with the figures today. I so move.
Okay, any other members? I think the one point to make, though, I'm very conscious we do have a service review on charges, and I think we did agree as a full council that every charge the council effectively had should be part of that service review. So if we are going to look at the potential for discounts, I think we need to be clear that should be within the 12-month period, because the service review does cover the next financial year basically, and there's a target there to save or to increase income by about £900,000 as part of that service review. So I think it would be unfair of this committee to effectively tie the hands of that service review, because obviously these charges, along with every other charge, will be part of that service review. And to be fair, when we do that service review, then at least we'll have an idea of what the usage is at that particular point. So I would be inclined not to go for sort of a 2-year discount. I think it needs to be part of the service review. I don't think we can remove any charge from that particular review, because it is a very challenging target that the council has set right across all departments, and it would be unfair to do that. But I'm supportive of the idea of a discount, certainly at an initial stage, in order to attract people to come along, but it's up to members really. Alistair, do you want to say something?
Again, I just need to put on the record, because we're being recorded, members fully and are fully aware that the cost of the slipway and hoist was below the original budget, and that was reported to members. I will come back with the exact figures, as I've undertaken to do. I don't have them in my head at the moment, but we were well under budget with this project.
I think it's also important that we're kind of muddying the waters a wee bit here, in the sense that the proposed charges here about the use of this facility, it's not about recuperating a capital investment this council made. They're very separate things altogether. Jim, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. We're partly being accused of making policy now. What I'm actually proposing is actually normal business practice. You want to attract new business, you offer a discount. We're also, I'm not adverse to making a profit, but what we've got to do is, we can look at predicted income at the minute, but predicted income in those prices will probably not be the same predicted income if your prices were lower. The point here is, and I realise that the facility sits right beside the marina, but this has actually got nothing to do with the marina. This is a totally different business proposition. This is a boat storage for cleaning and for working on boats when they're out of the water during the winter. We need to bring people to Stranraer for the winter. I hear what you're saying, Chair, about the service review, etc., and I would take that on board. You're absolutely correct. I would go for it will now be the amendment now of a 20% discount on the prices for the first year for all users.
Chair, point of clarification. I think that might be the motion. Did somebody second my motion? Oh, thank you.
Okay then. Sorry, Patsy. Yeah.
With a new financial thing coming in,
Yeah.
just like that, I mean, we have got no figures here. We've got nothing to support it or to defend it or to object to it. And I would wonder if that's a competent way to make a decision on something. I have the service reviews coming forward. I think if we want to do it then, that's right. But we're asked now to agree what's here, and I think that's what's in front of us. And we're given all the information with other facilities across, comparable ones, from Largs to Maryport and all the rest of it. I would be uncomfortable with something like that.
The point is, there are no charges at the moment, and what we're being asked to do today is to set those charges. So it's entirely up to members whether they wish to set the charges that are proposed, or whether they wish to set the charges with a discount. It's entirely up to members. We have no charge at the moment, so we're being asked to set those particular charges. The point on the service review is important, because once we've set a charge, everything we charge for becomes part of that service review. So it'll be reviewed as part of the service review. So whatever charge we set today will go into that service review and be reviewed as part of that particular service review. We have to set a charge first. And it's up to members whether they wish to set proposed charges here or they wish to have a discount for the first 12 months. I think the information is certainly there for members.
But Chair, we would normally have had options on whether we had these charges or whether we did a promotional thing. We would normally have had options in front of us that we could have chosen with, you know, with reasons and impacts and all the rest of it. We have got nothing here, except for one set of charges, which
we could have had options. I'll up to members. If they wish to bring forward options as well, you know, we're all grown up. We can come up with ideas ourselves sometimes, you know. Finlay?
I agree with where we're going. We're supposed to be an enterprising council, and we should act more like a business. So, you know, having a discount scheme, but we need, you know, I will find it very difficult to make an informed decision here whether a 10% or a 20% will have the effect of actually attracting people. And when I say making policy in the hoof, I'm not suggesting we're making a policy in the hoof, but we're making a decision, a business decision here on the hoof, without us actually realising the implications of cutting it by 10%. It may be better to cut the boat hoist by 20% and the storage by 50%. I would, a bit like Patsy, I would like to have seen some options on what the potential recurring fees or what would have been based on that. So I would find it very difficult to say 20% is the best way to go forward.
I think the difficult with that is that argument actually is the same argument you put for setting a charge in the first place, because there is nobody currently using it at the moment. It's not there. Therefore, until it's actually used, you won't actually know whether or not people are actually choosing to use the facility. So I think that argument kind of cuts both ways, to be perfectly honest. I think, to be fair, the proposed charges before us are simply based on a comparator with other areas. That's what the figures are. We're right in saying that's pretty much what the figures are there for, apart from the specific figure around the storage of owners, cradles and trailers, and we got the explanation that effectively it was there as a disincentive, if you like. But the rest of the figures are around comparative figures for other areas, certainly the lower level of that. So, you know, it's up to members to set the charges they see fit. I think what's important is we will get a report back as to the usage. I think, come back to Graham's point, as to the usage, and at that point it's certainly open to tweak the charges there. That, assuming, will be part of the service review as well. So it is entirely up to members whether they wish to set the charges proposed, charge with a discount, as Jim suggests, or another charge that anybody else wants to put forward. It's up to members, really. You know, until we actually have a usage, then we can't sort of determine. Berta, do you want to come in?
Yes. You know, I find this whole discussion on reducing the charge is quite demeaning for Stranraer. I really do. We have a beautiful marina, we have a beautiful harbour, we have the most gorgeous loch, and here we are, before the facilities even properly underway, we're cutting the prices. What does that look like after the amount of spend that we've put into this? I would have no objections to deferring this and giving it proper consideration and proper costings to come in front of us. So that would be how I would be voting if this comes to a vote.
Can I just ask, though, when do we envisage these charges coming into effect, obviously, as soon as the hoist is up and running? Yeah. Well, the challenge for that is that, effectively, what do we do in the meantime if we don't meet again until June, if you defer this?
Well, I suggest we apply the charges as is, look at the uptake in 6 months' time, and then make a decision as whether we need to discount it to attract new folks. So agree to what's in the paper just now and review it in 6 months' time.
Okay. Ian, do you want to come in?
Just going back to the point that Jim made, it's a perfectly valid one, and I would want to make sure that if we do move to having a promotional discount for the year, that it's properly advertised. It's perfectly normal when a business starts up to offer incentives and at the outset in order to attract the business, and whatever level they're set at, that's a fairly standard startup business practice. Well, exactly. How did Sky get all their customers?
Yeah, close. Ronnie, do you want to?
It's chicken and egg. You have to have a cost structure to market and advertise and put your adverts in all the boating magazines. So the quicker we get to a point where we've got a price that we could put in, marketing will have to come after that. So we've got to do it in stages. Today we agree the price, then the guys will get on. And obviously, there's a budget for marketing. So really, we should just crack on and agree where we're going to pitch these costs so we can market it. You know.
Okay. So we have a motion before us from Graham and seconded by Patsy, as far as I'm aware, which is to go with the recommendations. We've got, because the first motion was obviously withdrawn, we've got an amendment from Jim, seconded by Ian, which is effectively to have a 20% discount for the first 12 months. Is that correct? And we have a counter amendment from Roberta, which, do you want to remind us what that was, Roberta? Sorry. You withdraw that, okay. Okay. So members, happy to go to the vote on the motion and the amendment. Okay. Members clear what the motion and amendment is? Yeah. 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 The motion is to go with the proposed prices in the document, and the amendment is to go with a 20% discount for the first 12 months. Patsy?
Clarification on the amendment, 20% reduction on what?
All the proposed prices.
So we're accepting those prices.
Accepting those prices, but with a 20% discount for the first
that's not
12
clear.
months. But subject to the fact that will obviously have to be all reviewed as part of the agreed service review.
Chair, just for absolute clarity, if we couldn't have a 20% discount if we don't actually set the charges.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That was my point.
Okay, we have a motion put forward by Councillor Gilroy and seconded by Councillor Foster and seconded by Councillor Gilroy to go with the proposed prices in the report. And then we have an amendment put forward by Councillor McClung and seconded by Councillor Dick to apply a 20% discount to the existing charges contained in the report for the first 12 months. We proceed to the vote.
Councillor Struthers, sorry.
Thanks. A point of clarity in regards to the motion. I take it by what you've said that we're looking at service review that will come back to us. So therefore, we will be able to revisit this in a year's time. And if the business case doesn't stack up at that point, we can then apply a discount if needed.
What I'm referring to is the agreed service review to look at every single charge this council has, and that's an agreed service review as part of the budget process. Everything this council charges for will be up for review as part of our target to raise an additional £900,000 next financial year, following financial year. Okay, can we go to the vote then?
Councillor Smith?
Amendment.
Councillor Peacock?
Amendment.
Councillor Crothers?
Motion.
Councillor Carson?
Motion.
Councillor Dempster? Councillor Dick?
Amendment.
Councillor Foster?
Motion.
Councillor Geddes?
Motion.
Councillor Gilroy? Councillor Jack Grooms left. Councillor Lever? Councillor McClung?
Amendment.
Councillor Martin? Councillor Nicholson?
Amendment.
Councillor Ogilvie?
Amendment.
Councillor Prentice? Councillor Tuckfield?
Motion.
And I can confirm that the amendment carries for 9 votes to 7.
Thank you very much indeed, members. And can I thank Keith for his attendance today and wish him well in the role. I'm sure he found this meeting half as exciting as we did, Keith. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay, members, I don't have any more business. Thank you indeed for your attendance today.